Welcome everyone, and happy last meeting of 2020. Reminder, this meeting is going to be recorded. So let's just jump right in. We've got a lot on our agenda today. Looking at the minutes from November's meeting, please take a moment to review that. And I'll just jump in right away, Alexis, and say that Teresa's name is misspelled in section 4.
Thank you as always, Rachel.
I got you.
Got it.
Thanks. Any other comments or revisions?
Let's see. Can you hear me? Shoot.
Yes.
I have one thing about it. Says in my thing, it says now that C. Beatty is mayor, elections will be coming to fill her seat in May. So I think you meant Lacey instead of C period for the mayor, just a tiny little thing. Under liaison reports, number 3.
Great, I will fix that.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes with those revisions. Osvaldo, thank you. Do I have a second?
I second Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, looks good. Minutes approved. Let's move on to public comment now. Alexis, gear that up.
Yes, so if you are a member of the public and you would like to make a comment, now is the time. If you could just let us know in the chat. I'm happy to, or raise your hand, happy to unlock your audio. Looks like we have 2 hands up. First, we see new Councilor Allison Tivnon. So I'll go ahead and hit her button. Go ahead, Councilor Tivnon.
Hey there, can you hear me okay?
We
Hi,
can.
I'm so excited to join in on the meeting tonight. Thank you to Teresa for extending the invitation. I just wanted to say that the DEI plan update when I was running was a very important document for me to read and understand. And I spent a lot of time talking about it in conjunction with the community vision plan and the emerging climate action plan as being just really important benchmarks for us to look at all in conjunction with each other, and that we needed to use them all to help inform the decisions that were going to be made on council. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the work you have just done to update it. And I'm just thrilled to see this group in action tonight and can't wait to hear what you talk about. And if any one of you ever wants to get in touch with me to talk, share your ideas, or just to, start building a relationship, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to meet you one-on-one or group settings or whatever you'd like. So thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak. And yeah, I'll just be quietly watching you guys. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, it looks like we have Jody Monroy. Jody, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everybody on the board for their service and to extend a special thanks to those who are outgoing. And thank you so much for your time working for all of us.
Awesome, thank you, Jody. Anyone else, members of the public, if you could raise your hand or let us know in the chat. Any other public comment? And I don't see any, so I'll pass it back over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Alexis. And thank you, Allison and Jody, for being here and sharing your thoughts tonight. We have our first presenter next. Rachel Thieme, a familiar friend of ours from the city, is here to talk about a grant idea for night market vendors. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks for having me, everyone. I know you have a packed agenda tonight, so I will keep this brief, but I'm really interested in your input on this topic. As you may know, the city has distributed almost $3 million in COVID relief emergency grants to small businesses in Beaverton, and our focus has really been on helping physical businesses stay in their storefront locations. So a lot of this funding has gone to restaurants and salons and fitness businesses and childcare facilities and places like that. But we know that some businesses who have been significantly impacted by COVID have not had an opportunity to apply for some of this funding, notably the Beaverton night market vendors that don't have a physical business location in Beaverton. And so I've been chatting with Alexis and Jody over the last month or so about potentially allocating some funding from the economic development budget to create a one-time emergency grant program for Beaverton night market vendors, which would essentially cover, help them replace some of the lost income that they have missed out on this year due to cancellations of in-person event revenue. And so I know that the night market is your baby as a group, and we wanted to just get some feedback for you if this is something that you feel is important. And if so, we've presented this idea to our city councilors, who are all excited about the idea. And some of the feedback that we got were a lot of questions about how it would work, who it would go to, how much money. And so we wanted to come to you with some initial questions to help us really get the juices flowing and figure out how we could design a program that would really do the most good for our vendors from the night market. So we're proposing a $50,000 fund, and I'm going to post a link to a quick survey in the chat. And I'd like to know a couple of questions from you guys, specifically what the night market's been around for, I believe, 5 years. This was the 6th year. So which, should this be any vendor that has participated, or should we limit this just to maybe the vendors from the most recent year? I think what we've been talking about is the focus of some kind of need-based application would come through. Everything would be very simple, self-certification. We wouldn't be looking to provide, make people provide a ton of documentation or anything like that. But wanted to know if this should be focused on the more recent vendors, as well as the types of grants. Is your preference to award more vendors with potentially smaller grants, or fewer vendors with larger grants? And then would love any other feedback as we think about how to structure this opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead in the chat and paste this link, and I hope you can all see it. It looks like it just went to panelists, so hopefully that's okay, Alexis. But we'd love your comments there, and so that we can really structure this opportunity in a way that that makes the most sense for this group. We know the night market vendors and the night market has just contributed so much to Beaverton, and we know that these are some of the smallest businesses that don't always have access to all of the services, and so we really value these businesses and want to send some resources their way during this tough time. So I know I'm probably at my 5 minutes, but if anyone has a quick question, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, feel free to email me and put any questions you have in the survey link.
I can say something. Am I on? Okay.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I've been a recipient of a grant. It's the PPP. I won that. That was way back early COVID days. And since there are several things that have come my way. Now, when you say you want to single it out to go to the nighttime vendors, you're going to get a lot of headwind, because you're narrowing it down to one group. and I'm going by what I just went through, and I'll just leave it at that because they narrowed it down to a group, and people were coming from all different angles and saying, how could you not include us? If you say you're going to do past vendors versus present vendors, you'll find headwind. It's going to have to be structured a certain way. You will find, you will find that what we were doing, what we were supposed to get. There was a lumber company, I can't remember where it was. They basically said, we're suing you for $200,000. Is what they said. They were going to sue the fund. And they set aside the $200,000 in case they won the lawsuit. So they were very generous in that regard. But I just think that it's going to be tough to pull off. Now, I'm not saying don't do it, but you got to do it because I think wholeheartedly it's good. I think it's good, but you're going to have to really navigate that well to get it where you want it to go. And that's not a warning, but I'm just giving you a heads up.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we're currently processing other grants for more of the physical businesses, like those restaurants and gyms who've been impacted by the current closure orders. So this would be a special carve out from the economic development budget. Wouldn't be federal money or anything like that. So we have a little bit more leeway there.
That's very good. Very good.
There's a question in the chat box.
Yeah, that was from me. I didn't see an option to choose a 2020 vendors. Was that intentional?
It was. I had my understanding was that that those were more repeat vendors from past years. But if that is a mistake, I can quickly add that option.
Touching on what Dennis said, I think that, oh, I'm sorry. Did I jump ahead of somebody?
I was just going to say, Rachel, there were a lot of repeats, but there were some brand new vendors in 2020. Go ahead, Brandon.
I think a way around it could be like a lottery, and I know that's not ideal, but it's difficult. You know, it's tough for the vendors any given year to get chosen or not, and then to get chosen and then kind of get an additional bonus could leave some vendors sour that didn't get chosen. So I mean, people who had participated in the past get a lottery ticket, or maybe even people that haven't been selected before could be selected for, in the sense that they haven't got the opportunity to bring goods to the market.
Now, I'll add this here. I just went through one, and it was open. It had an open time where it says, okay, the fund is going to open at 3 o'clock. And so you had to log in and fill out your application, and then that was it. I tried to log in under another browser, and I had my wife, I'd open up the first one, and I tried to find questions. In 24 minutes, it had closed. And we're talking a lot of money because people will pounce on it. That's one way to do it. It's almost like a lottery, but it's like, okay, first come, first serve. And that's one way to keep it. Well, in other words, you're right. It's like a lottery. If you get in, you're in. If you're not, you're not. And then you're going to have to divide that pot. I don't know how you divide the pot, though. That's a good question. Unless you just made it equal across the board. If you have 50 people and you have 50,000, so therefore you got it. Everybody get 1,000. If that's just using that as a rough number, but that might be a way to do it.
Great. Thank you guys all for this. I don't want to take up too much more time on your agenda. I know I'm a little bit over, but I really appreciate your feedback. And I will make that quick change to the survey here, and would love any more comments in there. I know that there have been a lot of issues with grant program applications. And I would say we're on round 6 of our grant programs here in Beaverton, and we've learned a lot about much more equitable access to these types of applications, and would definitely be bringing that practice here to this effort as well. So thank you guys for having me, and look forward to your feedback.
Sorry, Rachel, just really quick. I think when we discussed this survey idea, we decided, I encouraged that we make it like a really quick, like asking you all to just fill it out either later tonight or maybe tomorrow or something like that. Did you have a deadline
Yeah, I would love the next couple of days would be wonderful. Yeah, that would be great. It's just 3 questions, so hopefully it won't take too much time. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Really appreciate it. And just to reiterate what they just said, take that survey tonight or tomorrow. We're up to cultural sharing next. We have Rehana this week. So go for it. Do you need to share your screen?
Yeah, I will at some point, not now. Yeah, I have to try and figure it out. I was trying to get my son to help me out, but he has to leave, but let's see if I can figure it out. So hi everyone, good evening. Hope everyone's doing good. Thanks for that, Rachel. So today I just wanted to share something about my my British Pakistani culture, because that's how I mostly identify myself as, a British Pakistani. And I'll just refer it to as BritPak for short, because it's a bit of a mouthful to say British Pakistani. So a BritPak is someone who's a resident or citizen in the United Kingdom, but has ancestral roots in Pakistan. And that's someone like me who was born in the UK, but whose parents are from Pakistan. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. So to give you an idea of how, a bit of history on how Pakistanis came to the UK, before the Second World War, India and Pakistan were one country, and it was ruled by the British Raj. Then following the Second World War, the British Raj dissipated the Indian Empire. So the Pakistanis moved in 1947 to a newfound and it was found by this man called Muhammad Jinnah Ali, and he found this land of Pakistan. And that's when all the Pakistanis moved to this new land. And some of the people who came to Pakistan either came to England at that time, or they stayed in Pakistan. It was around this time, around 1960, when my dad came from Pakistan to UK. And it was at that time where, you know, it was easy for Pakistanis to move to England because they were a member of the Commonwealth. Pakistan was a member of the Commonwealth. So they were afforded all the British civic rights. And then what immigrants would do when they moved to England, they were employed in, you know, they filled the shortages in the steel industry, in the textile industry, and they were also employed by the National Health Service as doctors and stuff like that. So to give you a little story about my dad, he came to the UK in 1962, I think. And when he first landed in the UK, he got a job in the rubber factory. So he was making the tires for bicycles. And, you know, later on, as he established himself, he bought a grocery store called Gifto Cash and Carry. And that's where he sort of made his most business. So with immigrants, they worked really hard in the UK because they wanted, you know, they would be sending money back to their family in Pakistan, supporting their family. And, you know, and if you ask most South Asian immigrants, they'll tell you that, you know, we worked hard because we wanted to give our kids a good future. Because they didn't want their kids to suffer the way they did. They didn't want them to do labor jobs. They wanted them to have solid careers. Like, you know, if you ask South Asian parents, I bet you they'll say, I want my son or daughter to be a doctor, pharmacist, lawyer, or engineer. So that's the thing with South Asian parents. They always want their kids to flourish. They always want their kids to not do the labor jobs that they were employed in. So, so I made some notes. I'm going to refer to them. I forget what I say half the time. So yeah, so as he became more settled, my dad, he bought a shop called Gifto Cash and Carry. I'm going to try and share my screen. And this was in the 1960s. Can you see that? Yes, okay. So this was so after he left his job at the tire factory, he got this job in British Airways, and at the same time he bought this store called Gifto Cash and Carry. And you'd find with immigrants also, they would work 2 jobs. They'd work, you know, so my dad would work morning shift in this gifter cash and carry, and he'd work in the evening in British Airways. So, you know, they worked really hard and really intense, and they just wanted a better future for the children. So this is the shop that he bought in 1960. This is about 1975, I'd say. This is about, I'm going to try and, okay, so this is 1975. And then, you know, as he became more established, as he started making more money, he bought another store. So this is the store, he bought the store next door. So he expanded it. So this is in 1985. And then as he became, you know, more confident in his work ethic, and he became more in touch with the business side of things, he then expanded, the family business expanded to a restaurant called Gifters Lahore Cry. So that by this time he'd sold the grocery store, and he developed, he bought a restaurant, and it served typically Pakistani food. Pakistanis are very fond of their food. They love their, you know, this is some of the foods that they serve at the restaurant, which is a typical mixed grill, your sick chicken, lamb curry, and there's like a lentil curry there. And then another typical Pakistani dish is this it's called biryani, and it's a mixture of rice and meats, and it's cooked in a lot of spices and very intense flavor. So that's what he did there. And then, you know, so, you know, all this culminated, this business, it was just the passion of one man who came to England at the age of 18, and with his grit, determination, and perseverance, he flourished and, you know, got this business. And this restaurant was actually named one of the top South Asian restaurants in London. So that's the story there. So sadly, my dad passed away 5 years ago, and as a tribute to my dad's legacy, my sons and I decided that, you know, we'd carry on his philanthropic work, because we're always, you know, giving to charity. So we thought, you know, why don't we open a store, a gifter suite? So we opened just a, you know, it was an idea that was floating in our minds. And we opened this gifter suites, which was a candy store. And the first store that we opened was made of, you know, you can see it's made of cardboard boxes, eggshells, and all that stuff. So we decided that, you know, we're going to open this and we're going to give some of the proceeds to charity. And some of the charities that we support are the Portland Refugee Support Group, the Citizens Foundation, the Palestinian Relief Fund. So, you know, we try and donate a portion of our proceeds to those charities. This is us a couple of years down the line. This is my sons at an Islamic relief fundraiser. I think they were trying to fundraise water for a project in Ghana. So that's a picture of how it all started out. So back to the Pakistani culture thing. So Pakistanis are very passionate about cricket. You know, Pakistan is has a famous cricket team. They normally wear green. That's their international color. So as a Brit-Pak, I'm always confused when England and Pakistan are playing, because who do you support? You support Pakistan or you support England? So culturally, you'll find that most Brit-Paks will support Pakistan, because, you know, that's we're passionate about cricket. But if Pakistan loses, then you go back to supporting England. So that's the general rule. Okay, you get the both the best worlds here. Another thing Pakistanis are really fond of is fashion. They love their fashion. Traditionally, there's been this is a picture of a fashion show in Pakistan, and you can see the cuts are not the traditional cuts. They're very East-West fusion, because that's the way the trend is right now. Very modern, floral, bright cuts. So that's something that we're really proud of. And the Pakistani fashion industry is flourishing at the moment. It's actually one of the biggest fashion industries in the world. Another thing that Brit-Paks celebrate is a festival called Eid. and it's twice a year. It's after Ramadan and it's after the pilgrimage. So during that time, you know, we like to put henna on our hands, and these are the different patterns that, you know, I've sort of came across. But, you know, it's a very fun festival. We love to dress up. I said we love our fashion and stuff, and we love matching our outfits with bangles. And this is a typical market where, you know, you can buy bangles, different colors to match your outfits. So that's something. And most Brit packs, most Pakistani Brit packs are follow the faith of Islam. So, you know, they have two festivals, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. That's another thing. And then lastly, I wanted to share this slide, which is, just wanted to give you a breakdown of the ethnic population in England. And this is from the 2011 census. You can see it's been a 2% increase. So there were from 10,000 to just over 1.1 million. From 1951 to 2011, there's been, you know, a drastic increase. And you can see it's not just the Pakistanis, it's all across the board, the mix, the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, Africans, Caribbeans, and recently, you know, Polish, Russian, Somalians, all across the board. So I wanted to show you this just to show, just, you know, to, because it reminds me of what's happening in Beaverton right now. You know, there's been an influx of different minorities and diversities increased. And this is why we're here now, right? We're here to celebrate this diversity, and just wanted to, you know, point that out that I love being part of the Beaverton DAB, and we're here for the cause of the minorities is just another bonus for me. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rehana. Does anybody have any questions for her or comments?
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can.
How many languages do you have in Pakistan? Do you have one language that unifies you, or are there several languages? Like we have in my country, we have a lot of languages. How many?
There are a lot of languages. So off the top of my head, I can think of Punjabi, Urdu, Sindhi, Kashmiri, Pashto. I can think of 5 at the top of my head. So I think there's many more than that, because I know India has 400 languages. So there's got to be more than that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Dialects, for example, like in England, we have like the London dialect, you know, the Southern dialect. Then you have the Scottish dialect. You got the Irish, and then you got the Welsh. And even I can't understand some of the Scottish people. You know, I mean, I have difficulty understanding strong thick accents. So, but yeah. So there's different colloquial, there's slang. You know, yeah, there's different dialects.
Okay, thank you.
I have to say too that biryani is I've never met a biryani dish that I didn't like. That is so good.
Yeah, it's so intense. Incredible. Hi, Manaji.
Thank you so much. It was beautiful. Could you elaborate a little bit about the 2 aids that you mentioned? The 2 aids that you mentioned, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Qurban.
Eid al-Fitr is the Eid after Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha is the Eid after the pilgrimage. So it's normally 2-3 months apart.
Yeah, so I want to add to that in Islam, after every prayer that we do, not every, but the major prayers that we do, like for example, the 9 months of the Arabic Islamic calendar, it's called Ramadan, and Ramadan we Muslims fast for the whole month, and then on the 31st day, which is the beginning of the next month, is everybody celebrates that because they are celebrating that they were successful in that prayer, and then the last month of Islamic calendar is called Zul-Hijjah, that people go to, all Muslims go to Mecca, the ones who can afford it, and it's like a kind of big Congress, kind of international. And that's how Malcolm X went to Mecca, and he found out that Islam, it doesn't belong only to Black people. And he noticed that all brothers and sisters from all over the world, they are praying over there and they are gathering together, they're standing together. So he came back to the States and he changed his idea. He announced it that Islam doesn't just belong to Black. That's how people and Nation of Islam became against him, and you know the history probably. And so on that, for the 9 days, the first 9 days of that month, they have some kind of ceremonies and all those things. And on the 10th day, we again kind of celebrate, because that's a big celebration. And it's called Eid al-Adha, which the people who go to Mecca, they have to sacrifice lamb or camel or whatever they can afford. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Rehana. And you have a couple of nice comments in the chat box as well. So make sure to take a look at those.
Thank you.
Let's move along with our agenda here into our liaison report section, starting with Councilor Arnold. Your final liaison report.
My final night, and I'm going to have to leave at 7 because my other liaison assignment is Beaverton Committee for Community Involvement, which moved their meeting till tonight too. So I'm going to go miss a half hour of yours and a half hour of theirs, and I get to end with the 2 committees that are closest to my heart. I actually started on the Beaverton Committee for Community Involvement in 1995. That's how I started learning about what the city really does. And then I got on council in 2005. And so 16 years later, there's things I want to share, some of the better things that we've been able to create, the long-term things that are important. First, having to do with municipal buildings, we were able to there's like 4 things we've done. One is the Beaverton building. That was in bankruptcy, and we were able to buy it for less than half of what we would have paid for it if we had to build a building ourselves. So that was a steal. That was like the greatest thing we could do. At the time, we needed space, and it just really made sense. We also built the Murray Shoals branch, adding on to our library, and we've added a lot of really neat programs over the years in the library. So our library is something else I'm very proud of, and to see what we've seen change over time. We got the public safety bond measure passed so that we could build a resilient police station and emergency management place. I always was worried. You guys have probably heard me talk about that Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. I mean, it could happen today, it could happen 100 years from now, but it's like about a 40% chance of it happening in the next 50 years. And we're past 75% of the time differentials, we're past 75% of them now. So we're, it's not, we don't know when it's going to happen, but we as government need to be responsible for it. And at the time where our police station was in the old Griffith Park building, they would have been victims. The building would have fallen on them. They wouldn't have been able to even run. So thank God we've at least got that in place for police and emergency management. Also, another thing that we've done for preparedness and the greatest need is when you look at what we do at the city, the vast majority of the money we spend is on things like roads and water pipes and police and those type of things. And we have been working to be part of the Willamette water supply program. So we've got a cut into that. And what that is it's going to be a new water intake that comes into our valley from the Willamette River that they're building to be both resilient and redundant. So what we'll have is redundancy from it. And that means we've got a second source of water coming in. So if something goes wrong with our first source, we've at least got another source. And that's the redundancy. And of course, the resiliency is we're building it to withstand the shake. If people who live in South Beaverton right now, you pray to God that we've still got another, I don't know, 30, 40, whatever years it's going to take, because you need pipes in the ground if you're not even going to have water. at your house. And so that's an issue that we have to take a long look at. So we've done some really good work. We got a long way to go, but we've been working on that. And I'm really proud of all that work. As far as the community building, the groups that I have seen start that I feel so grateful for is the Vision Advisory Committee. And they came up, the visioning plan, they come up with a plan, and similar to what you do with DEI, they'll go back and they talk to people and then they update it. But again, it's this, what's similar is that it's an ongoing effort. We're not just writing something and putting it on a shelf and walking away. This is an ongoing effort that we do to try to promote the visioning. And for you guys are so perfect from right now. The Diversity Advisory Board, my gosh, what an important issue. And for the long-term effect for people in our community, thank you for your work. And again, we're at least putting a light and shining it at what we're doing and what we're encouraging other people to do too. So those are the things I've been the most proud of to see. The three things I hope the council will take away and continue to work on for the long term. I love this saying, it's much better. I used to say what matters to me is what I leave. That was after I went through cancer and faced dying, and now my kids are grown and my body's crapping out. And it's like, whatever I do, what I say is what matters most is what I leave. But there's an even better saying that goes something like this, that the best use of our time is on things that outlast us. And there's three main things I see that I hope the council will continue to focus on. One is what I talked about, the resilience, that we get ourselves prepared. Earthquakes don't kill people, buildings do. What's gonna hurt people is things falling on them, not having water supplies, not having access to roads to get to hospitals. If we can get to the moon, we can figure out what to put on the ground to take care of ourselves. And I just pray to God we have 50 years and we continue to work on it. So that's an element where we're taking bites out a bit at a time. Again, we've done some great work on the water supply side, but we've got a long way to go on that as well. The other thing is sustainability. I mean, the COVID has been something, I don't know how many of you have also seen in the background of the news. This has been a crazy year, the most hurricanes named ever, wildfires, even wildfires in the areas that used to be Arctic, near Russia. They're having wildfires there where the Arctic ice has receded, the permafrost is melting, and they're having fires. And then what's going on in our oceans? If we do not figure out how to live in a balanced circular life with the rest of the life forms on this planet, I don't know what we're going to be leaving our kids, but it's not going to be pretty. So those are two structural things that are really important. And the third has to do with you. And that is, we still have such a long way to go as far as equality for all people. And it's a hard one. It's another elephant. You know, we can talk about police reform, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more that's going on where people don't really have the same chance because of their backgrounds, and that we need to continue to change. And you guys will have a part in that. And that's my hope, is that at least from COVID and what we're seeing now, we have eyeballs looking at it. This is the hardest elephant because often it's not easy to figure out what the elephant really is and what we need to take out to change it. But we need people who have that insight. And I feel like there's a lot of that insight on this board, and I feel like you're bringing it. And I'm keeping those three things in front of us. I hope that the council will continue to work on them, because they will be the things that make the greatest difference for our children and our community in the future. And thank you for taking me back in and letting me end here with you. That's meant a lot to me. I've really enjoyed our conversations and our meetings. So thank you all for all of that.
Thank you so much, Councilor Arnold, for your many years of service and beautiful vision for our community. And I'm sure this is not the last time we will be seeing you around. Appreciate you and all your work. I don't think that Karenna is here tonight. So I think we're good to move on to our liaison report from the Beaverton Police Department. And it looks like we have a whole squad here tonight, including an old friend of ours, Captain Smith is here tonight. So let's hear from you all.
I think, Rachel, I'll defer to Mike first. He's back by popular demand, so I'm going to go to him first.
Hello, everybody. Hey, I just wanted to pop in and just mainly I wanted to apologize for I felt bad about how the transition occurred. It was not as I hoped it would be, but it's how it worked out. I wanted to let you know that I think maybe 3 years I was involved with the DAB was a great experience. I very much appreciated this group's contribution to our community, but also to the police department. I regularly would take back information from this group and from our meetings back to our department and shared information. It's just super valuable, and I'm glad that Captain Wandell and Lieutenant Stillingworth are continuing to keep that relationship going. So just, I apologize for how that went. I really enjoyed, like I said, the experience. I really felt welcomed, and the information I was able to share was valued. And I especially appreciate your listening and your openness to hear about what we're doing and how we do this job. And I just felt like it was just a really good group of open-minded listening. And I appreciated your ideas and your opinions and your concerns. And I just think there's just a tremendous amount of value in this group for Beaverton. So I don't want to take a whole bunch of time, but I just wanted to jump on here and say what a good experience it was, and wish you all the luck as you continue, and thank all of you for your service. And those of you that are completing your service, thank you very much. And for the new faces I see on here, welcome. And this is a good group, and I'm sure you're gonna really enjoy it. So with that, I thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Okay. And he's still around. He's in the patrol division. So you ever want Captain Smith to come back for another appearance to make that happen. Quickly, Rachel and everyone, I think that I just want to remind everyone that Neil and I are available anytime for conversation or questions. So feel free to email or call us at any point in between the monthly meetings. And then I think for Monica, hopefully my email is still correct. I think you're helping us out this week on some promotion processes. Is that right? I think so.
That is correct. I think she may be frozen, but that is correct.
Okay, good. So we have a promotion process going on Thursday for sergeant, and then we reached out to Alexis, and Monica from DAB has graciously offered to help us. So she's going to be participating on the interview panel. So we'll give you an update next month or even before then. So I think that's all I got, because I know everyone's running a little behind time. Does anybody have any questions for Neil and I or Captain Smith? And if not, Rachel, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, I don't see any questions or comments, so I suppose we will move on. Thank you three for being here tonight, and good to see your face one more time, Captain Smith, as well. Oh, Osvaldo has something.
I wasn't going to say anything yet, but I changed my mind, as I usually do. So, but since this is going to be my last meeting with the Diversity Advisory Board, I want to personally thank Captain Smith for your commitment. Like I just wrote on the chat, I always thought it was sincere. And I think that's what we need as a community, is to get the opportunity to talk to our in this case, our police department, like we are talking with our relatives. Because if I have learned one thing during these 6 years is that as much as we think that we're different, we're very, very, very alike. And we like to be able to communicate with each other just, you know, in the best way possible. And I think you guys have made that possible, especially over the last 3-4 years. I think it wasn't easy at the beginning. I think during these 6 years, I have been through, 3 captains, 3 chief of police. And especially the first one, I forgot his name, I'm sorry. I think, I mean, this is my personal, very personal perspective of the situation, is that he got to the point where he was feeling really uncomfortable what was happening. And so he probably decided, you know what, I'm going to retire. He didn't retire, he went to work somewhere else where there was very minimum diversity, I guess. Again, this is my very personal opinion. Anyway, I think that's what we need. And I think when Captain Mike Smith came aboard, it was because we needed that. And sometimes there's a lot of things to report. Sometimes there is nothing to report. And that's okay, because it means that there's not a lot going on. We're not complaining, and you guys are not complaining. So, hey, ooh, where will we need to be? I think, yeah, we need to work, continue to work. And I just want to say thank you to Captain Paul and Lieutenant, oh my goodness, Neil. Thank you for your support. I'm sure that the guys that are going to be, that are staying here with the diversity and the new ones will put some pressure on you for whatever it is that life throws at us. And so don't be discouraged. Just listen to what they have to say, and then we'll come up with solutions together, because that's what we do.
Thank you, Oswaldo. I appreciate those kind words.
Rachel, if there's an opportunity for me to say something, can I add to that?
Go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to second what Oswaldo has said about Captain Smith and the dedication, the insight, the level of wisdom you've brought to the table every time you have joined the meetings. I think for me, you are maybe the only captain I got to experience for the longest. And I think with time, I just grew to really look forward to what you would bring as new announcements or updates, because you have a level of depth that we needed and a level of patience that we also needed, just diving into those uncomfortable conversations, that what can be perceived as uncomfortable conversations, particularly this year when we had to deal with the summer racial unrest. And I also would like to really, really appreciate you for just kind of stepping in when we needed you as a community. You didn't have to, but you came on board and helped really bring a sense of calm and help build a bridge between the community and the police department. So just wanted to also say thank you, because again, for me, today is my last meeting on DAB as I transition to another board within the city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline. And
may I say something too?
Yeah, one last thing.
Okay, I make it short. I just wanted to let Captain Smith know that we miss you. I miss you so much. And besides me, my daughter feels so sad that you're not part of DAB anymore. And Mariam is your #1 fan. And every time we talk about police, he just talks about you about it. And he says, when I see Captain Smith, I'm so hopeful that all these negative talks about police will end hopefully soon. Thank you so much. And we wish you the best and happy holidays. Love you.
Thank you very much, Monache. Let me just say one thing, and I'm sorry to take over your meeting here. I really just wanted to make it quick, but there's a whole bunch of Captain Smiths that work here at the police department. There's 140 of us, and there's a lot of great people that work here. I hope that you all get an opportunity to meet more officers from the Beaverton Police Department. I very much appreciate your comments, and it makes me proud to work here and to serve this community. And I'll be here for at least another couple of years, I imagine. So I got an email and I got a telephone, so you're welcome to call, reach out anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more quick thing before we move on. I believe ATRAC will be wrapping up their work with the BPD, well, at least their work from this year, on reviewing some of those policies and procedures of the Beaverton Police Department. And I'd love to have our liaisons from the BPD maybe give us a high-level overview of some of those outcomes or findings starting in the beginning of 2021. So we can touch base about that more later. But moving on, apologies to our presenter for getting behind schedule. But next up we have Rob Zoeller, Associate Planner with the City of Beaverton, here to talk about the Racial Equity Toolkit and housing projects in Beaverton.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen so you can look at a presentation. Okay, and let me see. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, great. So I'm actually joined tonight by Elena Sasson. She's also an associate planner at the city, and she is working with me closely on this project. When this project first kicked off in 2018, I wanted DAB to be the first meeting of nearly 40 meetings so far. It was, and from that meeting, 3 DAB members volunteered to be on our working group. Monica, Cynthia, and Cece. Monica and Cynthia are still on the working group. Cece, of course, is not, because she now works for the city. But the project has mostly been on pause for about a year because of some changes in state housing law. But we're ramping up again. And a big change is that we're starting to use a racial equity toolkit. We started this summer, and that's the point of tonight's meeting. I've been debriefing with Alexis about my experience using both the DEI plan and the Leading with Race report to drive this project. And I thought it would be beneficial for you to see how we're using these documents to inform our work. Tonight, I'll give you some brief background on the project before walking step by step through the toolkit. So in Beaverton, we kicked off this project to expand housing options in 2018. For those familiar with House Bill 2001, in 2019, Oregon State changed the state law to essentially end single-family zoning in Oregon. This project started 1 year before the bill passed, but it does largely overlap with the bill's intent in case you're reading about that in the news. The end goal is to update our zoning map into development code to allow a mix of housing types at a range of price levels in all of the city's residential areas. This is a quick look at the study area. It's essentially all residentially zoned areas. It also involves all neighborhood associations, and it does not involve any commercial or mixed use areas. So now I'd like to take you through my experience using the Racial Equity Toolkit. Advancing racial equity has always been a part of the project in some way, but it wasn't until this summer, about 2 years into the project, that we started using the toolkit to come up with a framework for creating equitable housing alternatives. We're doing this work now, and in future projects, we hope to bring this toolkit into the process from the beginning. Admittedly, if we started with this 2 years ago, the process would look very different. I think many people in this meeting might be familiar with the racial equity toolkit, at least by name, if not by practice. But the bottom line is that we're trying to integrate racial equity into decision-making, and the hope is that we have a more equitable housing strategy. We're using what is called the GARE toolkit. This is specifically developed for local governments. There are 6 steps. We've completed the first 2, desired results and outcomes, and data. And we're in the middle of working on steps 3 and 4, community engagement and analysis and strategies. And of course, steps 5 and 6 would not be relevant until the project's nearing completion. So step 1 is desired results and outcomes. On the following slides, I'm going to take you through my experience step by step. And I'm only going to cover the first 4 steps, as I mentioned, because that's just where we are in the process. So it helps to know the original project goals. So here we have allow more diverse housing types and sizes. This could refer to smaller units in existing neighborhoods to put more affordable housing on the market. It could mean more aging in place options, as well as trying to help out with home ownership opportunities. A second goal is to promote flex for property owners so they can have more freedom to do what they want with their site. And then the third is to adopt strategies to mitigate displacement. These goals were drafted 2 years ago before we started using the toolkit. This is a good time to explain to you how we draft project goals. The idea for this project goes back to the community vision about 10 years ago. And over time, other plans and studies, such as the DEI Plan, have reinforced and added to the themes in the community vision. We rely on these documents for policy guidance and recommendations to drive the project. We try not to steer from the language in these documents because we know they're the result of significant public engagement, and they've been improved by City Council. With that in mind, if policies are not in these plans, then they are less likely to make it into project goals for the same reasons. And that brings me to this summer when we took another look at our project goals. I think we all know that there was a lot of racial unrest throughout the country this past summer. And it really changed the way we looked at a lot of our projects. So we started using the toolkit, we went back to the beginning, and we thought of how we could try to center racial equity. And then we added advanced racial equity to the goal list so that we could explicitly call out the importance of race. But that also meant we had to articulate goals for advancing racial equity. So this is where I started using the toolkit. I did a deep dive into the history of housing disparities and came up with a goals list that could respond to these. But then I realized I was looking more at national best practices and my own research, and I was moving away from approved policies in these documents. When I looked back at city documents to anchor the work, I couldn't always find policies to support these goals. That's not to say that the city would not support these goals if they were raised. It just means that the language was not in the documents. So an example could be what's highlighted in green, minimize involuntary residential displacement. This is something we see repeatedly. It's called out as a priority. It's in the Housing 5-Year Action Plan, among others. And it's something I can easily carry forward. But I came up with 4 other goals: advance desegregation, foster healthy communities, improve children's outcomes, and promote culturally specific solutions. And these weren't necessarily specific policies. So going back to the guidance we've already had, I kept what had previously been approved, minimize involuntary residential displacement, and then I tried to tie it back to things that have already been established in the other plans. Second, allowing housing types that meet the needs of large families and multi-generational families across neighborhoods in Beaverton. And 3, creating opportunities to live in neighborhoods of choice. This is where the goals list is today. It could change as the project moves on, but at the end of this meeting, we'll have time to talk about some of the goals that are not officially called out, which you can see they're stricken out on this list. Which brings us now to step 2. So moving on from goals to data, the idea here is to collect data or identify missing data that can help us understand existing housing disparities, and then set us up for how we might measure the success of future housing strategies down the road. A few examples come to mind are, will this proposal have impacts in specific geographic areas? What are the racial demographics of those living in the area? What does population level data, including quantitative and qualitative data, tell you about existing racial inequities? And are there data gaps? Starting with historic racial inequities, we realized that researching and acknowledging racist land use and housing history in Beaverton and Washington County was essential in order to inform our work. This in itself is its own project. So we hired 2 interns, Misha and Isabella. They are the lead researchers doing this work. The research project is still ongoing, and we look forward to seeing what they produce. I think sometime this winter. But historically, we already know that planning practices such as zoning have either directly or indirectly harmed communities of color. This is just one topic that they'll be looking into, among others. Moving on to current racial inequities, we leaned heavily on the Leading with Race report to identify housing disparities in communities of color in both Beaverton and Washington County. I won't read them all, but I'll share one about Central and East Beaverton. We know that African American, Black, Latino, Native American, and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities overall are more likely to rent their homes than own. This limits the neighborhoods that people can live in. We don't have a map up here, but we know that there's large single family areas and there are smaller areas where multifamily housing is concentrated. So if they're more likely to rent, it means they're more likely to live in small pockets within the city. In addition to racist land use practices and ongoing housing disparities, we're also looking into the history of design and development standards. Now we know that design development standards also kept Black people, immigrants, and working class families out of neighborhoods by making it expensive for owners to build in certain areas. Many of these were actually created in the 1800s, they predate zoning, by landscape and architects that wished to create the aesthetics of Old English estates. So if a city wanted to make homes more expensive, they simply just established a large minimum lot size. A larger lot is more expensive to build, and that just prices out certain people that couldn't afford to live in that area. This is a practice that still persists in our development code today. It's pretty much a planning standard. It happens across the country. Over time, some of these practices would be deemed illegal, such as minimum cost requirements for a house. But many of these implicit barriers, they do remain in our development codes today. These design and development standards, they affect a lot of things like even just our front yards. Now, lawns, gardens, and trees might seem apolitical given their connection to nature, but their design and use conveys messages about class and by extension, race. To this day, our design standards reinforce the image of the ideal 1950s suburban front lawn. An example is that the city requires large front and rear setbacks in most neighborhoods. This is the distance usually from the sidewalk to the house where you can't build. And again, this is a tool that makes building more expensive. It reinforces large lot types, and it continues to price people out of certain areas. Some cities, and this is more national because we're still looking at Beaverton research, but some cities would also only allow an ornamental garden in the front of the house with no sign of a vegetable garden. And this signifies social status because it means that you could afford groceries and lawn care. Now, back mid-century, a lot of working class families were still raising their own food, either through gardens on their property or with livestock. And as a way to distinguish themselves from these people, white people removed these gardens. So it indicated they didn't need to do this. Another thing they would start to do is take down fences, because fences were often designed to hide clotheslines. Clotheslines mean you can't afford appliances. It again signified that you're working class. You remove the fence, it means you have nothing to hide. These are just a few examples, but the end result is that there's an image created where there's a large unfenced yard, and the whole idea is to protect a clean, orderly aesthetic that would distinguish these yards from the working class yards. Since people of color historically were not allowed to live in or buy in these neighborhoods, these spaces then become inherently associated with white suburbanites only. And this identity has many roots, but one thing is certain, it is protected by design requirements in development codes, in homeowners association bylaws, and even in deed restrictions that collectively reinforce the sanctity of the white suburban front yard. And that brings us to segregation. Knowing that most of the city's residential land is still set aside for single-family homes, I decided to compare the racial demographics in single-family neighborhoods, which are the pale yellow areas on this map, with multifamily neighborhoods, where we have the dark orange areas where you're more likely to see rentals. The map on the right shows census block groups that consist almost entirely of these single-family neighborhoods. And what we found was that these single-family neighborhoods are 84% white. And white people own about 90% of all housing in these single-family neighborhoods. Of all communities of color, Latinos are least likely to live in these single-family neighborhoods. They are 4 times more likely to live in multifamily neighborhoods in the orange areas on the map. And when they do live in single-family neighborhoods, they are, Latinos, again, are less likely to own their home. Beyond Latinos, other communities of color less likely to live in these single-family neighborhoods are people that are Black, multiracial, or identify as some other race on census forms. Now, this racial segregation map is not too surprising when you look at the history of zoning in the city. There's a lot going on this map, but without going into too much detail, the map on the right shows when houses were built in Beaverton. It's divided into 3 main periods. The red area are homes built before 1964. Orange, homes built before 1965 and 1984, and green is homes built between 1985 and 2004. There is nothing after 2004 because it's mostly residential infill, which is built in small pockets throughout the city. And in the 1960s and 70s, the city still allowed some multifamily housing, but in the red areas, they allowed all housing types. And then as you start to move west, in 1960, the city creates its first single family zone only and starts to separate these housing types by uses. That would continue until the 1970s. And 1978 is actually a pivotal year in our city's history. It's when the city revamped the development code again and made 5 of the 8 new residential zones available for single family houses only, essentially now creating a stark separation between single family and multifamily. And if we compare now 1960s and 1970s development when single family zoning took off, we see a very heavy overlap between white racially segregated areas in 1960, 1970s residential development. And we know that areas with mostly single family zoning, again, these are areas built between 65 and 84. These are mostly white, they're higher income, and they're higher wealth. We know from census-based research that children that grow up in these areas experienced improved outcomes in adulthood. So one thing to keep in mind is that increasing housing options in areas such as this could improve educational and professional outcomes for children that grow up in these neighborhoods. And that brings us to engagement. On the next few slides, I'll talk about what we've heard from the public so far. So far, we've had close to 40 meetings. We've mostly heard from white homeowners and to a limited extent, some multicultural groups. So there is work to do. But what we've heard so far are that people would like more duplexes or housing types with that support 3 or 4 bedrooms for larger families. We've heard from many people they'd like housing types with common rooms or community buildings for family gatherings. More housing options near schools, parks, and houses of worship is also something we've heard. People have asked for more parking. I won't get into that tonight, but I should mention that the state law will now be regulating parking. So historically it would be the city that decides, but the city will have limited options for how to regulate parking. And going back to our research with current housing disparities and ongoing segregation patterns, we know that the following communities would benefit from additional engagement, but for some, the disparities seem even worse. So looking at this list and just going by data alone, it appears that things are a little worse for Latino, Black or African American, Native American, and Middle Eastern and North African. What we're trying to decide is, does it make sense to establish priorities with this system? Higher priorities or medium priorities, or do we try to reach all of these groups that are experiencing some degree of housing disparities? So that's something I'd love to hear from you if you have more feedback on that tonight. And that brings us to step 4. This is going to be pretty high level, so hopefully it helps. But I just wanted to take you through the early stages of how we're starting to think about analysis and strategies. A couple of questions to consider are, given what you've learned, that's me, from research and stakeholder involvement, how will the proposal increase or decrease racial equity? And who would benefit from or be burdened by your proposal? At this point in the process, with all planning projects, we usually come up with 3 or 4 strategies to discuss with the public. Based on public engagement and additional feedback and meeting with council, we then select one strategy to refine and develop. And the details for the strategies you're about to see, they don't matter at this stage, because what matters for this conversation is how we define racial equity and how we operationalize it. So this is our first approach. With our first approach, we came up with 4 main ideas, and one strategy, what we were calling the friends and family approach, explicitly addresses racial equity. It does so by focusing on affordability, displacement, building community relationships, providing more family-friendly housing options, and considering culturally specific housing considerations. But one critique of this approach, and these are internal conversations, we're only working with, as a team at this point, there hasn't been engagement on these. But one critique is that the approach is mixed in with other ideas not related to racial equity. And another critique is that it relies too heavily on affordability and fails to address other disparities related to race. So our takeaway from this round was to elevate racial equity as an organizing principle. So in round two, to further elevate racial equity, it becomes the driver of a new concept, what we're calling the mosaic approach here. This approach goes one step further by removing additional development design barriers. So there is even more flexibility with what people can do throughout the city. However, by using racial equity as an organizing principle, racial equity is now framed as a driver that competes with other drivers, namely environment and design, and it potentially ignores the synergies that come from thinking of these ideas together. And that brings us to the third round. At this point, we expanded the racial equity goals by trying to remove even more development barriers. We're essentially giving people more freedom to do things with their property, but now there's the concern that this might lead to displacement pressures in some areas. Also, racial equity is still a driver that competes with the other drivers. And something that was especially bothering me is that it wasn't directly considering environmental justice, and it felt like it was in conflict with an approach we have called out that was supposed to center the environment. And that brings us to our fourth and current approach. Feeling that it was problematic to center racial equity, we removed it entirely with a driver. We still have three concepts. One is just more of a deregulated approach. The second is one that centers environment and concerns about climate change and resiliency. And the third is looking at design, thinking about current neighborhood patterns and how we can allow new housing types that match the scale and form of existing houses. But then that leaves the question, so where is racial equity? And that brought me to this framework. So instead, racial equity is now pulled out. It's a framework through which all concepts must be evaluated. The intent is to combine issues of affordability with environmental justice and neighborhood design. The framework has 5 principles: expand housing options, mitigate displacement, promote broader mobility and connectivity, develop healthy communities, and promote environmental justice. So the idea here is that no matter what strategy we come up with, we start with the principles, and all 3 strategies need to move through in order to survive. And then the principles we've come up with could be the foundation for accountability metrics, so we can start to look at what these 3 options might provide and have a way of comparing apples to apples. So that is a lot of information late in the night, but I really just kind of wanted to, let you experience this process, because there aren't a lot of places to look. I haven't had a lot of places to reference, and I rely so heavily on the DEI plan and leading with race report, but I don't have the opportunity to show you what I'm doing with it and ask for feedback on, what's working, what's not working, and, anything you basically have to share about this process. I've come up with 3 questions. We can talk about any of them, but if you have any general feedback, I'd love to hear it. So these are the questions I think Alexis already shared in the email. But my first question is, what are your thoughts on potential housing related goals not explicitly mentioned in the DEI plan. So you might recall that when I was coming up with a goal list this summer, I started thinking about advancing desegregation in significantly white communities, the need to create more mixed income neighborhoods, improve children's outcomes in higher opportunity neighborhoods, which should be its own bullet point, and promote culturally specific solutions that respond to the varied histories and experiences of communities of color. I can talk more about that if that's not clear. And then a couple more questions. Do you have thoughts on prioritizing outreach for certain communities of color? I talked about the possibility of higher priority and medium priority groups, or do we just try to take a broader approach to, you know, and not try to prioritize one group about another? And we didn't talk too much about displacement. We're still in the early stages of that. I do have a map if it would help to look at. But I wondered if you had any particular concerns about how we should be thinking about displacement. One approach is to potentially, you know, try to regulate development intensity so we don't change it too much, leading to a lot of new construction. But we also want to increase wealth building opportunities for the people that live here so they can benefit from these changes and neighborhoods can be revitalized. So that's it for my questions, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
This is Caroline. I have just one or two things to say. One, I would like to say thank you so much for that in-depth presentation with analysis that shows so much work that you put in. I wanted to make a comment about the public engagement. I think when it comes to categorization of the groups of the racial groups that live in Beaverton, I saw something like Black or African American, and then there was something like Northern Africa or Middle Eastern. And I wondered how that category was, how those categories were determined, and where the other portion of the Africans that are not North African, I mean, where they fall. Do they fall under Black or African American, or are they just not included at all? And then the next thing I wanted to share is our definition of racial equity, or just equity in general, is one, through the racial lens, and two, we focus on outcomes and not opportunities. And so when we measure equity for the city of Beaverton, all we want to focus on is the outcomes and not how many, in my mind, I would interpret that as not just how many units were available for, say, people of color to own, or say Black people to own, versus how many Black people were able to own units in the city of Beaverton. And when we narrow it down that way, then the question becomes not just the units themselves, but how do we make it easier for these groups to be able to either get the houses or get be able to move to Beaverton and live in Beaverton, and also be able to, once they move here, be able to feel like this is home. Because again, some people move because they either don't have, the food types that they're used to in the city, and they have to drive to North Portland. And so there is a lot of things that really impact why people live in a community or choose to live in a community, that are not just the housing itself, but the resources that are available for them in that neighborhood. And I think that at the end, that is what drives the outcomes versus just the opportunities. So those are my thoughts. I think they fall in step 3 and step 4 question.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, well, to answer your question about the categories, we've been leaning on the Leading with Race report for categories, and those those are the categories that are listed. As a planning team, we actually asked that same question that you asked, and I don't know what the answer is. We keep saying, oh, we need to call Alexis, but I'm not sure. So yeah, we rely on that report for the categories. But I do want to point out that in the interest of time, I didn't get into the specifics of data sources. I should probably add that to slides. But the Leading with Race report looks at a much wider geography. It looks at a big part of Washington County. And so there's, you know, people are able to self-identify with more categories. When I'm talking about segregation, I'm looking at census groups at the smallest level, and the racial groups are collapsed. So it's not as easy for me to call out certain groups, and there's something lost there. But it's the only data source that allows us to look at segregation because it's such a small group.
It felt like too hot of a microscope. On my bad days, I would feel like I was loading a cannon of clickbait when that's not what I want for my life.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, please. I don't know if we're in the middle of a conversation or not, but again, thank you for the presentation. I think it's important to take a look, even if it is, or I don't know how possible it will be, but what about the financial part of it? A lot of times, segregation happens also because communities of colors are not allowed the same opportunities to get money from certain banks to purchase real estate. And I don't see, and I think actually there is a mention in the study of, what is it? The one that you're looking at?
The Leading with Race report?
Leading with Race report. I remember seeing something about that specifically. And every time I hear all of these projects and plans and everything, and they never mention anything about what kind of programs are there to talk to financial institutions, so they would either be more controlled in terms that they are not discriminating against us. I mean, us, just the community in general. But you know, because it happens sometimes, it's not, they don't measure or they don't analyze things the same way when white people are going to lend money or ask for money as to when you know, people of color are going to ask for money. So is there a way to include that in that study, that project?
So you raise a very good point, and I didn't communicate that in this presentation, but something we know that we need to do is to address housing more holistically, and money is a big part of that problem. So just last week, I called Javier Mena to basically talk about the money part and say, look, this is what we're trying to do. What am I not doing that could help your work? And we talked about affordable housing and what types might be better, what's harder to finance, and what programs might be compatible with some of these changes in here. So we will all be working together, and the planning division doesn't have the authority to change those, but we are working as a team to make sure all of our strategies complement each other.
I think at this point, we only have time for one more question or comment. And then I would encourage any other feedback to go into the chat box or sent directly in an email to Rob and or Elena. I think Monica might have something.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was waiting a little bit. Rob, thank you very much for the presentation. It was much easier right now than the very first time we got together and we started developing this. I don't want to overwhelm you with all the questions. My only thing is, it isn't a possibility to do one-on-one over the phone like we did one time. I have some suggestions or questions at the same time, but I don't want to do it right now because it will be too long.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah. Yeah, we can do that anytime.
Okay.
I'll reach out to you and set it up.
Yes, thank you so much.
And I can send this, Alexis. I'll send you a copy of the PDF.
Thank you so much, Rob. I really wish we had more time because there's obviously more interest in continuing this conversation. But if you could please put your contact information in the chat box just for ease for folks in the meeting right now, so they can follow up with you if they want. That would be great. And we really appreciate having you here with us tonight. And so with that, we need to move on to our officer elections for 2021. At this point, we have a few nominees, and we'll also, oh, perfect. Thank you, Alexis. Putting that in the chat box right now. We obviously also want to open it up to collect additional nominations right now, either by nominating yourself or someone else, and then giving folks the opportunity to accept or decline their nomination. Again, the positions, officer positions that we're looking to fill here are chair, vice chair, and secretary. Alexis, is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Just in terms of process, the way that we normally do this is for for us to collect all nominations, make sure that everyone that's on the list is okay with that, and then to vote, starting with chair, then vice chair, then secretary, if there are multiple people that we need to vote on. And then, well, yeah, and then that would confirm the list for next year. So this would be starting in January, and also helping to plan for January's meeting and beyond. So yeah, so I think the first thing is what Rachel said. Anybody else need to make it on the list for nominations for yourselves or other folks? Going once. Go ahead, Ahmed.
Hi, everybody. Sorry to be late. Alexis, maybe you can explain what the difference between vice chair or chair, because maybe, or secretary, because maybe people, they don't know what the difference between those positions.
Sure, yeah. So the chair and the vice chair and I meet every month. So they both of those roles have a part in planning the agendas for each meeting. But the chair is sort of the first go-to person. It's the person who generally, leadership teams have done it differently over the years, but generally the chair is the person who does facilitation of the meetings. And if that person is absent, then the vice chair is there to be the second person that would facilitate meetings and help sort of run things in their absence. But they're both involved in planning the agendas from month to month. They're also the first team of people that I would go to if we have a special request for something that is, it could be a media request, it could be a, contact from another board, could be somebody from across the country that Rachel spoke to earlier this year about their DEI work, et cetera. And Rachel and Teresa just presented to council about the annual report. So both of those positions are kind of those key folks for the year. Again, sort of in order there. And then secretary, of course, is the person who takes the minutes each month, does that really important recording job so that we can stay on track.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. And the only folks that are not eligible for chair and vice chair role are folks who are alternates on the board currently. So nobody on that list right now is our alternate, but yeah, Monica?
I submitted my candidates last month. So do you still have that? Okay.
Oh, are there people that are not on the list?
I didn't see the list.
Oh, the list is nominated for chair is Rachel, nominated for vice chair is Teresa and Shara, and nominated for secretary is Anusha.
No, they're in the list.
Great. All right, well, not hearing any other nominations. Is everyone that is on the list currently okay with being nominated for the positions that you're nominated for?
I nominated 2 people and those 2 people are on the list. Or 3 people, sorry. Those 3 people are on the list.
Great. Can I just get a thumbs up if you're okay with being on the list where you are currently before we vote? All right, and Shara told me already that she was okay with that. So, all right, so then we're gonna go. I usually ask for the vote just because it's a little bit because the folks that usually call for the vote are on the list. So I will go ahead and do that this time. I apologize that we don't sort of have I haven't figured out a blind way to do this. We often write it down on a piece of paper or something. But we don't need to vote on chair because Rachel is our only nominee. So we'll just sort of set that aside and we'll vote to affirm all 3 of folks at once at the end. But let's go ahead and.
Sorry. So, sorry. If I decline, does that mean we could just like skip and be done?
That means that the board would vote to affirm all 3 folks that are on there.
Okay.
But that decision between the 2 of you would not happen.
Okay, let's do that.
Now, Teresa, I want you to stay and thank
No, I want you to
for
go.
nominating me.
Opportunity.
You know what? I'm gonna vote for you and Rachel.
I believe in you. You got this.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm a new person in Beaverton area and I'm totally new in DEB. I just finished my first year. And, I'll be more than happy to take any position if you think I can do it. That's my pleasure, but I think you and Rachel, you did great for the last year. And if you stay in a board, we're not gonna be in any, we're not gonna feel any gap. So I want you to stay. I'm gonna just vote for you and Rachel as well. And of course, Anusha for secretary. And last decision is for all our members. Thank you.
Thanks, Shara. Well, Teresa, it's up to you. It's up to everyone. So you get to decide if you want your name to remain on there or if you want to pull it from the list.
Well, the person who I nominated doesn't want it, so I don't know. I offered up her name, so of course I want to see her get it. There's that.
Does that mean we're keeping your name on the list or we're taking it off?
We'll just keep it on, I guess, unless there's anyone else. Anyone else? Opportunities galore.
Okay, we'll keep them both on there. Shara, you had told me that you're okay with being on that list. Is that correct?
Yes, sure.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. Again, I apologize, it's not a blind vote, but please, all of you know that wonderful candidates on the slate. So for vice chair, if you could, let's see, how should we do this? If you can either raise a thumb or a hand, if you would like to vote for Teresa or Rachel, are you going to suggest something different?
Well, I'm wondering, can you not use the polling feature like you did for the progress ratings? That was blind.
That is true. I can.
Because then we can retain anonymity if folks feel more comfortable doing that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good suggestion. It might take me a couple minutes to set that up. So do we want to go on to the next item and then come back to this?
Yes.
While I do that?
I'd be happy to move us along and return back.
Sounds great. I will set that up. Thanks.
Sure. Unfortunately, the next section kind of involves you a little bit as well, but I think I know who's leaving, so I can just share that. Yeah, so this is the bummer part of our meeting, kind of, where we have to say goodbye to some folks that have been really critical to our board and to the work of our board, and who we will miss dearly. Cynthia, Oswaldo, Caroline, and Dahlia will be leaving us after this meeting. Many of them are moving on to other boards and commissions with the city, which is awesome. But I wanted to open up this time for folks to say some goodbyes or just thank yous, including the folks who are leaving themselves some last parting words. So Monica is really excited to go.
Yes. Well, not excited because they're leaving, just excited to express. Thank you for all of them, because every person in this committee means a lot. It's not only this person or that person. The group we started 7 years ago, 6 years now, it was fabulous. And I learned so much, and I want to say thank you to Cynthia. Cynthia was one of the people who, when I started, she was there with Cici. Cici is not there anymore, to help me out and start teaching me what it means to be on the board. And I learned a lot from them. And I know she's going to be wonderful, the new committee she is in. And we will still see each other to go and have coffee, okay? Would you have to come to Bethany so we can go and have coffee? So thank you so much, Cynthia. And I wish you the best. And I know that you will do a wonderful job as you did with Dab. And I really sad because we were so close, the meetings and all the eatings that we couldn't do this year. But thank you. And I will see you around. Thank you, Oswaldo. And you were very, very kind, and you too will help me sometimes when I need it. So I thank you very much. And Caroline, it was a pleasure working with you. You were always sweet with me, the way you greet me whenever you saw me. And that means a lot in my heart. Those expressions of how you feel about a person is fabulous. I'm not going to say nothing to Rachel because Rachel is staying. She's staying. Thank you all.
Is it okay if I go next? I think Monica said it, the meetings and the eatings. That pretty much sums up Dab. I am emotionally not ready to leave Dab. You guys are my, you guys feed my soul. This meeting is the meeting that I look forward to the most by far every month, because we get a lot of stuff done, and we support each other in a way that I don't receive support in other parts of my life. We all understand each other. I am never in a place where there are so many other immigrants, other than when I visit my own family. So this is an extremely important part. Jody, I know you're listening to me right now. Put me down. I'm still volunteering for Night Market. We've talked about this for a long time, and Oswaldo will echo the sentiment. Like we have to leave. Like we have to leave and go on and do different things. So I appreciate you all. And the next time there's food, invite me, because I missed like most of this year. So.
Cynthia, can I say something else? I want to say thank you because you know that I went through a very difficult time and you were there. So is Alexis. But you guys were more than just colleagues on the DAB. And as you know, Alexis and Cynthia, you both know a lot of me. And it's been so wonderful being able to talk to you in those moments, to each of you. So I'm very, very thankful, and I'm happy that I know how to contact both of you. And so whenever it happens, like my next surgery, February 17, my other shoulder. So thank you guys. Thank you. DAB is being more than just a committee on the city. It's a friendship. And it's a camaraderie, you know, that we came together. It's beautiful. And that's why I think being my last year here, I think that I will miss that part, how wonderful it was. But I just have to say thank you.
This is on the next.
Very, very heartfelt. And I also just want to say thank you. Thank you to this board. I think I consider this board the most meaningful board in the city because we touch all boards and we touch all operations of the city, even though not directly, but we influence a lot of their decision making. So I just want to recognize the effort that Alexis has put in this work and the effort that all of you have put in this work. The founding members of this board, like Cynthia and Manager and I think Oswaldo, I don't want to get the names wrong, but you guys got in when you knew nothing about what was going to happen, and you've stayed in, you've committed your time, your energy, your effort to bring this board to where it is, where it's very enviable. I think that speaks a lot to having a pioneer spirit. So we really, really do appreciate. I just want to wish everybody that is staying on all the best success. This year has been very trying in many ways, but we've managed to cruise through the year. And my hope is that 2021 will come with, yes, its own challenges, but great opportunities for us to move DEI in the city to greater heights. The reason for me that I decided to apply to another board is just so that we can diversify those other boards as well, so that we're not all concentrated here. We can still have those conversations on those boards, but still recognize the efforts that are radiating from this board. So I would say the reason I'm going is because of this board. I really, really appreciate you all. And yeah. Thank you.
I want to talk. So it's so hard to call DAB with no Cynthia in it, Oswaldo in it, and Caroline. And ever since I joined DAB, I have been so lucky and blessed to meet so many great people with great ideas and beautiful wisdom. It's like when I think about back, when I think back, we had Dr. Thieme, kind of so many wonderful, wonderful people, and I'm so blessed to see the new people who are coming, and like Rehana and Anusha and Shara, so many. It's so hard to, and Denise, and it's it's wonderful. It's a wonderful world. DAB is kind of like it has a magnet for great wisdom, great people. And Alexis is the pivot of that in that. So I'm not going to say goodbye to you because I stay so long. And I'm suggesting that you people come back to us as the liaisons with your kind of, please come back to us as liaisons of your new committee and kind of board. And bring back on the news from them and take our news back to them, because it's so hard to sit there and not seeing you guys. And I'm so happy that you're still in the city and you are continuing your services in other boards and commissions. But I cannot express my feelings, how I'm going to miss you, how much I'm going to miss you guys. Because I feel like, oh my God, Osvaldo is not there with his beautiful, wonderful questions and comments, ideas. So it seems like the beautiful garden that we have, some flowers are changing to other flowers and flourishing. So I am really grateful for you guys, and I'm grateful for the people we have now. It's amazing. It's like, I call that like a university, college, and I am this kind of smallest student, and that I'm learning so much, and I cannot thank you guys enough for being there and for moving on to other other communities. But please come back and bring good news to us and take our news to them. Thank you. I love you all. And I'm going to miss you all.
Well, I hate to cut this part short because all of the feels, but we do need to return back to our elections. And so I'll just say thank you again so much, Caroline, Osvaldo, Cynthia, and I know Dahlia is not here, but her as well, for your service to our board and to our city, to our communities. We're really gonna miss your voices in this group and your hearts. So best of luck in your next endeavors. Alexis, back to you.
All right. Thank you for stopping me, Rachel. I have set up a poll for our vice chair. I'm going to send it right now, and you all can put in your vote, and then we will vote for the entire slate, just so that we officially have in the minutes that the chair, vice chair, and secretary are affirmed here. So here we go. Has everyone voted?
Was it one question or 3 questions?
Only one question, because there's only one nominee for chair and one nominee for secretary. So we're just going to sort out the vice chair and then vote on all 3 together. I had a feeling this might happen. This was the result.
Oh my
in true DAB form.
Who is
excellent candidates? What did you say?
What?
I'm sure she voted for me. I'm gonna step back, Teresa. I really want you to stay.
Is it in the bylaws or something if there's a tie?
Yeah. I don't think so.
Did
no,
everyone
not that I know of.
We have 13 people on, right? So, right? Then we would go to members, alternates, everyone votes.
We have 14 people.
Sorry, alternates, we usually have participate in the vote, but in this case, it would matter. So their vote actually technically does not push us over the edge. So I'm gonna launch it. I'm gonna see if I can launch it again. And if Dennis and Rehana, you could sit this one out.
Wait, that leaves us with 12.
I know, but it might make a difference.
Okay, here we go.
We're voting again?
Voting again.
Is there a time limit? Like, do we have to end at midnight?
My iPad is with 5% power.
It's so hard to decide. They are both lovely.
People went to visitors too?
No.
In the chat? Okay. Oh, I think that was a question. They wanted to know if visitors can vote too. That might help us decide. That's for sure.
I'm pretty sure the bylaws say something about that, but they don't say much about Zoom. So
throw Rob in there. Rob, you can vote too. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, but see, Teresa wanted Shara to win, so Shara should get it.
All right.
It looks like we have a result this time. Thank you all. Very hard decision, I would agree.
It is hard.
All right, so then to finalize this part, I will call for a vote to, a motion to approve Rachel as chair, Teresa as vice chair, and Anusha as secretary for the 2021 officer team of DAB. Did somebody move? Before you vote, I need a motion and a second.
Move.
Thank you.
I second.
Cynthia, great. Now you can all go ahead and vote. Thumbs up, raise your hand. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Raise a hand or say aye, or say nay, I mean. Great. All right, we have officers for next year. Thank you so much.
Bravo.
Congratulations, guys. You have our support indirectly.
Alexis, do you want to wrap up with your updates?
Yeah, sure. I will just say I sent you all the staff liaison announcements over email. I will just quickly share my screen so other folks who are on the call can see it, and I will do it in 30 seconds. You can see the changes for this year in terms of the board. We just went over that. In terms of the city news update, we have an interim city manager. The person was announced today, Kurt Wilson. So see the city press release or your handout for more information. Beaverton Winter Lights is happening right now. So if you haven't had a chance, please go out and see the displays. There's also videos on the website to take a look at them this year. And One Book, One Beaverton was released. The book is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, and there will be a whole series of activities in January programming around the book. So please tune in for that. And then finally, the Highway 217 Auxiliary Lanes project is having an open house on December 17th virtually. So wanted to make sure you all know about that. And those are the updates. Thanks very much for an incredible year. We look forward to seeing you in 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Good job, Cynthia, Caroline. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good job.
Thanks,
Good job.
everybody.
We should be
Good luck,
invited
guys.
to
We gotta get
report
together
on
for
how
Christmas.
we're doing in those boards
Good luck.
Love
next
you all.
year.
Happy holidays.
I just wrote that to, I
Happy
challenged
holiday,
Rachel
guys.
to do that.
Love you, Oswaldo, Caroline, Cynthia.
Right. Let's connect on social
See you
media.
later, guys, and
I'm going to
good
read
luck.
that.
See you
Thank
next
you.
year.
Thank you for being. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
I love you.
Yeah, see you next year.
Yes. It's going to be a long time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.